Joining us now from the Middle East, Eddie Yeranian. We're going to merge him in with Colonel Mike, also on the air with him. Colonel Mike, a longtime listener and supporter of the 9 years on the John Fredericks Show, also a frequent guest host. And we're with Eddie Yeranian, veteran CBS Radio, Voice of America in Cairo. Eddie, great to have you, man.
Thank you, John. I've got the hiccups, and the phone line is doing a bit of hiccuping, too. So let's hope this goes through.
It's all going to be fine, Ed. Okay, reaction to the killing of General Suleimani. What is it, Middle East? Give me a general reaction.
Most of the people I've actually spoken to who are here in Cairo, since I'm on the ground in Cairo, sounded very enthusiastic about the strikes that took out General Qaseem Suleimani. And many people told me it was high time that the U.S. reacted to Iran's provocations across the Middle East, not just against American forces, but they also attacked Saudi Arabian oil facilities. They also attacked Gulf shipping. They've also attacked shipping in the Red Sea. They've also attacked Saudi cities from Yemen. Many things. They also support Hamas in Gaza, which fires rockets all the time into Israel. They also support the forces in Syria that are occasionally firing into the Golan Heights and elsewhere. They support Hezbollah, which often fires rockets into the north of Israel. And I'd say the Sunni reaction, and Sunni Muslims are more numerous than Shiites. Obviously, the Shiite reaction is different. But Sunni Arabs were mostly supportive, and there were videos on social media of Iraqis in Baghdad celebrating the news of Qaseem Soleimani's death.
I tell you what, let me. I'm going to get Mike involved here in a minute, but let me just read a couple of texts here. I want to read, if I may. Edward Yeranian, you're part of the family, been with me for 9 years. Get your reaction. Let's see. Let me see where I can start here. Andrew in Glen Allen, Virginia says, great show this morning. No one else has this depth of insight. Well, thank you, Andrew. Appreciate that. Eric in Richmond says, soft power doesn't work with evil men, and says, great point, John, on AUMF. You've been saying it for as long as I've been listening. They don't do crap, and he's right about that. Nick in Virginia Beach, I can't get through all of these, my listeners, but I'm going to get through some of them. He says, the Democrats have proven they will do anything to sabotage the president. We had a few moments ago, Joe Rubin was on, Undersecretary of State for President Clinton under John Kerry, and he said that the real issue here is, what does Trump do next? Do they have the next steps played out, because the retaliation is inevitable? How do you react to that, Edward?
If I were President Trump, and I'm not, and I shouldn't be giving advice, I would react very quickly, and I would send a cruise missile over Ayatollah Khamenei's house. I think many people I've bounced that off of, especially Americans, have said that's ridiculous, and it's provocative, and it's going to set the whole region up in flames. But I think it would take out the queen bee, and it would send the Iranian people out into the streets to rejoice, because I think more Iranians are opposed to the regime than support it. And that's probably counterintuitive, because if you watch Iranian TV, which is run by the government, you'd see this morning massive crowds in Qaseem Soleimani's hometown demonstrating against the raid, and saying what a martyr he is and what a hero he is. But I think that would pretty much decapitate the regime if Trump actually took out Ayatollah Khamenei. Just declare war on Khamenei. Don't declare war on Iran. Declare war on Khamenei and take him out.
The way he did with Khomeini in Libya. Other than, I get back to the, did I say Khomeini? I'm sorry, Gaddafi, when Reagan did this strike. But I've always thought that the best, no, it's hard to say this because it's his family died. But I think the way it turned out, which was not the way they planned it, Gaddafi got injured, lived. His son died. His daughter got wounded severely, and his wife died. But he was still in charge. So there wasn't chaos. There wasn't a vacuum, right? But then he just became our ally because he figured the next time they're going to take me out, right? That was fortunate. So what you're saying is you don't want them to take Khomeini out. You just want to send them a message, or you want us to take him out?
I think that the government would still be in place. So if he were taken out, that would pretty much put an end to most of the hostility, because I think the people around him are ready to negotiate with the U.S. I think it's the Supreme Leader himself who is leading this charge against the U.S. And while these people follow him, I think if the Supreme Leader were to suddenly leave the scene of history, that Iran would change course, even if the President Rouhani were still there.
Okay. Let me get one other text here in. Curtis Ellis will be on at 8:30 listening. Says Nancy Pelosi thinks she's commander-in-chief. Dream on. Want to get that up there. That's pretty funny, Curtis. And James in Newport News, Virginia says the attack on the embassy was a test to see what we would do. They have their answer. These people are insane. All right, I want to get Colonel Mike involved. I think he's on the line here as well. Is he with us? Colonel Mike, you're on with John and Eddie Yeranian. I know you've got some comments and a question for Ed. Colonel Mike, you're on the air. Happy New Year. Go ahead.
Happy New Year, John. Hey, Eddie, happy belated New Year. I didn't get a chance to send you an email, and good evening in Cairo. Eddie, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Colonel Mike.
Okay, great. I texted John this morning about asking you that question. I said I wanted him to ask you about what Khomeini, and I believe the same thing. I have a lot of Iranian friends here in America in the Washington area, and I think the people are ready for the big change. John had a great guest on just before you, a former Obama deputy secretary or whatever, but it was the same political answer you would expect at some point. He says, we don't know what to expect next. Well, if you're in the State Department and this is your beat, the Middle East, you should have these plans in place. When you make a strike, what's next, how you want to move the military, the Pentagon. That's the reason, John and Eddie, we spend, $780 billion a year pumping up the Defense Department and the contractors. So you have to have step two. But I think this goes back, John, to, our generation, where Donald Trump looked at this like the next Jimmy Carter move. And you're not getting me for that. And I don't care about impeachment, and I don't care about Steny Hoyer, the Democratic Party, the Republican Party. Lives are in danger. I'm pushing the button. He's got to go. And I think that's what we have to look at. The president didn't take 13 hours, 13 minutes, he just said, I'm the president, I'm moving forward. Impeachment's not blocking me, and I'll take the blowback. And guess what? It doesn't matter what the media is going to say, whether it's good or bad, and it's going to be bad anyway. And I think Iran got the message. And I don't think, Eddie, in the region like you, people want this over with. People are tired of these bullies, and these guys been operating like gangsters for a long time, and they got their billions buried in Dubai. And, it's time to just go to Dubai, empty the account, and go get a passport to Nicaragua. I don't know.
All right, Ed, so reaction... obviously, we're going to get the typical reaction from the pro-Iranian media. Hezbollah has already reacted and called it an act.
State Department, John.
Yeah, well, look, I've got Mark in Chesterfield. We had Joe Rubin on. He says, typical Obama foreign policy person, sit on your thumbs and do nothing, is what Mark in Chesterfield said. Gene in Chesterfield said, mixed emotions this morning, but wouldn't we all feel more secure if the border wall was completed? Good analogy, Gene. So, look, Egypt's reaction, the official reaction from the Cairo government, Eddie, what has it been?
It's a Friday. The Egyptian government is very, very quiet right now. I think the problem is a lot of countries like Egypt, which play a leading role in the Arab world, are compelled to step back and not to make any official proclamation to the effect that they support the strike. And legally, they would perhaps have to condemn it. So they're being kind of silent, but street reaction says it all. The people are very supportive of it. At least the majority of people I spoke with, I didn't hear one person tell me that they opposed it. And I think that's the reaction you're going to get. I mean, just watching social media, listening to the Saudi-owned Al Arabiya TV, you can tell that the reaction is positive. Watching Twitter, most of the Saudis are rejoicing. A lot of the Sunni Iraqis are rejoicing. Of course, there are a lot of Shiites in Iraq who are not. But then the most telling thing was the demonstrators in Baghdad, that is the real demonstrators in Tahrir Square, who were out there against the Iraqi government and the Shiite-dominated Prime Minister, Abdul Mahdi, who were rejoicing. I mean, there are multiple videos on Twitter, if you look, of people celebrating last night after the U.S. airstrike. So I think that's the key there, because these people will be supporting the U.S. rather than opposing it now that that Suleimani and one of the very unpopular Shiite militia commanders were taken out.
So
Good news.
When you say that people were celebrating it, Eddie, I missed that. Who was doing that?
The protesters in Baghdad's Tahrir Square. There have been massive protests in many Iraqi cities for the last 2.5 months since the beginning of October. And these protesters are protesting the government, which is the Shiite-dominated, Iranian-dominated government in Baghdad. And also, these people who control the reins of power have been trying to get the parliament to vote on pushing the U.S. or compelling the U.S. to leave Iraq, but many of the parliamentarians don't want to do that, and they're just avoiding parliament and not going to parliament. So basically, the Shiites, Iran, no longer control the reins of power. So if these militias were suddenly to disappear, there is a chance of creating some sort of change within the Iraqi structure to get the Sunnis re-involved in the government, which is something we probably should be doing.
Why aren't they involved?
Because Mr. Bremer, probably President Bush, Mr. Cheney, Mr. Rumsfeld, these people, and of course our former CIA chief, his name skips is not on the tip of my tongue right now, who was in the U.S. military commander in Baghdad for a long time, decided that it was a good idea to empower the Shiites. I don't know why that is. You can speculate. But anyway, they did, and they disbanded the former Iraqi army under the pretext that it was all Sunni, mostly Sunni at least. And they empowered the Shiites and voted a law through the whatever parliament they had at the time to say that anyone that had any involvement with Saddam Hussein's government, which included teachers and university professors of all things, could no longer participate in politics. And that was a big mistake.
George Bush, as I've said, for 9 years, worst president in the history of America. Every decision this guy made, him and Cheney, and they're unrepentant, every single one, a catastrophe, disastrous administration, and the Cheneys are still running around Washington. They will not go away. They're like the cockroach. You keep stepping on it. You pick up your foot, and they run out the door. Just gross.
Eddie, were you talking about Petraeus?
Yes, General Petraeus.
Yeah, General Petraeus, yes.
Oh, my God. It's just, whatever happens, you trace it back to another disastrous decision of George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, Bremer, Petraeus, whole thing, a complete and unmitigated disaster that we're going to be paying for, I don't know, in perpetuity. I mean, it never goes away. I mean, everything Obama's done, we're undoing it, right? We're fixing it. Whether it's Obamacare, the judges. We're fixing it, right? Tax cuts, tax raises. We're fixing it. The George Bush administration was such a colossal catastrophe. You can't fix it. It's there in, perpetuitous time. And the Cheneys are still running around Washington as if they have some magic touch on something. They just need to go away into the ash can of history. John Fredericks.
Listening to Eddie, I just want to say this before I get off.
Go ahead.
Listening to Eddie, you can see the reaction in the Middle East. We finally have a president who drew the line and said, okay, you attacked the embassy, now you have to pay. This is not a Jimmy Carter regime. We're going forward.
It's not a Benghazi
the
either.
The response is good. That's right.
It's not
Thank
Benghazi.
you, Ed. Thank you, John. Thank you both guys.
Eddie, Mike, thanks for being with us.